helping people cope with and overcome life's challenges. This is Life Transformations with Michael Hart, certified Christian counselor and director of Ottawa's Elim Counseling Services.
Hi, this is Michael Hart of Elim Counseling Services, and I want to thank you for listening to this episode of the Life Transformation Radio Show. We're very excited today because we have a second part of a show that we did last week, Overcoming Intense Emotional Pain, and we will be giving some strategies today, some tips as to how you could do that. So keep your dial tuned to this show. And we want to give you some information about our ministry if you're not familiar with us, if you're just joining us for the first time. We're a Christian counseling organization. We provide professional psychotherapy from a Christian perspective. Now that is unique. So this is one thing that differentiates us from others, in that we believe that the spiritual component can be a part of the answer to the problem that you come to us with. So Elim is spelled E-L-I-M, counseling with 2 L's, and our website is elimcounselingministry.com. Or if you just put Elim Counseling, you should be able to find us in Google as well. You can also call us at 613-699-1677. And I think Ed said this is a second part of the series on overcoming intense emotional pain. This is actually part 3, where we will be looking at some solutions. So with me in studio, as always, is Melissa Wagaton. Thank you, Melissa, for being here with us today.
You're so very welcome, Michael. It's always great to be back, and I'm really excited to wrap up this examination of intense emotional pain we've been walking through using Psalm 55. And hopefully at the end we give the listener some really practical tips and advice about how to overcome this emotional pain if they're experiencing it themselves.
So I wanted to read the scripture again, because I want people, if you didn't listen to the other 2 parts, so you can be able to get an idea of where we are coming from with this third part of the series, and you can understand the background to this show. So for the background, we looked at Psalm 55, and it's a story of David as he explained his feelings, his deep, intense emotional pain that he was going through at the betrayal of a friend. So I'll just read from verse 2 through to verse 8 of Psalm 55. It's a much longer psalm. You can read it in its entirety if you want, but I'll just give you those few verses. David says, "My thoughts trouble me, and I am distraught because of what my enemy is saying, because of the threats of the wicked. For they bring down suffering on me and assail me in their anger. My heart is in anguish within me. The terrors of death have fallen on me. Fear and a trembling have beset me. Horror has overwhelmed me. I said, oh, that I had the wings of a dove. I would fly away and be at rest. I would flee far away and stay in the desert. I would hurry to my place of shelter, far from the tempest and storm."
And this was such a rich story from the last 2 episodes that we did, and we really encourage you, if you missed them, to go on the CHRI website or go on the Elim website and listen to them again, because there was so much we gleaned from this verse. And just for the purposes of setting the foundation for today's discussion, I was wondering, Michael, if you could take a few moments just to briefly recap some of the topics we went through.
It's one of the things we talked about in this show, in the past show, is the importance of getting in touch with your feelings, because oftentimes when it comes to intense emotional pain, the tendency is to try to push these pain away and to be strong. I think there's a lot of pretense in Christian circles where we can't be weak. We can't admit that we are in pain. In some church circles, you can't even say the word depressed if you're depressed, because to say the word is to give power to the word. That's how some people think. So if you were to say, I'm feeling depressed or I'm feeling anxious, some people would rebuke you because they would say you're not having faith, you're giving power to the word. But I think that's a dysfunctional practice, because when you give voice to your pain, you're actually taking power over it and being able to voice how you're feeling. So if we look at this psalm, we see that David talked about his feelings. He talked about his heart being in anguish. He talked about fear and trembling. He talked about the desire to fly away from his troubles and be at rest. And so I believe that this is one of the reasons why David was so resilient, because he had so many problems. Talk about family problems. He had a son that was trying to kill him. He had friends that betrayed him. He had a lot of turmoil. His boss wanted to kill him. And so when we think about the life of David, we are talking about a life that there is a lot of things there that could make him depressed and dysfunctional. But we saw that David was very resilient in how he dealt with those situations. And I think part of the reason for his success is that he wasn't in denial as to what was happening around him. He got in touch with his pain.
And it's great to see if someone going through that kind of stuff, which hopefully no one out there listening is going through to that degree today, that it was successful in building that resiliency within him. The other thing we talked about in the last couple shows was about some of the physiological symptoms that come through when people are experiencing emotional pain. I'm wondering if you can describe a little bit about what types of things people may experience in their body when they're going through these emotional times.
So when David talked about fear and trembling, it's possible that this is what is called, this is a kind of agitation that he was going through, where he has this edginess where he can keep still, and he's consciously moving, or he can't sit steady. And so when he talks about trembling, it's this edginess, this agitation that we sometimes see in people who are very, very stressed. And so that's one of the physiological symptoms. We also find people who are going through deep, intense emotional pain, that there can be things like racing heartbeat, aches and pains. Some people talk about this feeling that they have in the middle of their chest, like there's a knot. And for some people it's in the stomach, where they feel as if everything is just in just one big knot. So these are literal physical symptoms that are sometimes associated with intense emotional pain. Then we have things like insomnia, where there is sleeplessness that ensues as a result of that. Fatigue can also be another physiological symptom, where a person isn't able to sleep. So this can be a kind of slippery slope if you think about it, because if you're in a situation where you're stressed, you're tired, but you're unable to sleep, you can just see how this snowballs into bigger and bigger problem, because the more tired you become, the more agitated you become, the more anxious you become, the less energy you have to deal with your circumstances, and so it just becomes a very, very, very difficult situation unless you get help to deal with that.
And then the last bit we talked about in the last few shows was regarding the way David described his situation. And he used a lot of great imagery in his description of the events that were going on. He describes the tempest and the storm and different aspects like that. And you had really talked about how this is a strategy that you used in your own practice to help people kind of weed through this emotional pain that they may be going through.
Right. I think imagery is very, very powerful. It has been said that a picture is worth 1,000 words. And I think when it comes to psychotherapy and helping people identify what is it that they're feeling and what's going on in their situation, it's good to help them to come up with an image that captures that situation. And so in the Psalm, David described his situation as a storm, a tempest. And so I've had people talk about their situation as being this big rock that they're carrying around with them, or this dark hole that they find themselves in. Elsewhere in the psalm, David talks about his situation in other imagery. For example, he talks about his situation as being this slimy pit that he can't get out of. So it's good to have that kind of imagery, because when your mind can wrap itself around your situation in the form of an image, then it's easier to treat, it's easier to deal with. And one of the strategies that today we talked about, we wanted to look more at strategies, and I'll get more into this later on. But one of the strategies for helping people overcome difficult, intense emotional pain is to, number one, start with that image that represents the situation that they're in, but come up with an image that represents where they want to be eventually, what that would look like. And if your situation now is a tempest and a storm, what image would capture where you want to be in the future? We see an example of this in the psalm where David talks about being in this slimy pit, because he came up with another image later on in that psalm where he said God took him out of that slimy pit and placed his feet up on a rock. Now, if you think about the differences between those two situations, the slimy pit represents that place where you can't get traction, that place in which you feel stuck, that place in which you're trying to get out of, but the more you try to get out, the harder you try, it's the more you keep sliding back in. But when David said that his feet, that God has placed his feet on a rock, what he's saying is that now I have another image, and in this image I have traction. In this image I feel that there is a place of stability. In this image I feel I can stand. I'm not slipping down and falling back into the pit. I am now on a rock. And I think it's a very powerful imagery that can be very liberating if clients are able to capture their future state in the form of an image.
So we really encourage you, if you are going through that, start thinking about those images. What does it look like, and where do you want to get to? Because as you say, there's a lot of power in those images. And for today's show, what I think we really wanted to get into was the description, David, and we touched a little bit on it last week, but we didn't have much time. So it was David's description when he says he wanted to escape his pain, and he used the term he wants to fly away to the desert.
Yes, he said, I would flee far away. Verse 7 of Psalm 55, I would flee far away and stay in the desert. So oftentimes when there is intense emotional pain, there is this deep desire to escape it. And if you give in to that desire to escape it, instead of dealing with it, sometimes people find themselves in very, very, very dysfunctional situations. One of the ways in which people escape their emotional pain, one of the dysfunctional way, I would say, because there are healthy ways of doing that, but one of the dysfunctional way is through comfort eating, where we find a lot of people, they're stressed, and at night they get like 10 bags of chips and a big bottle of Coke, and they will sit there in front of their movie and just snack away.
Don't judge me, Michael. I love my barbecue potato chips, but it's true. For me, if I'm having a stressful day, my mind will go to barbecue potato chips. And you're right. If you do that every single day or too much, bad things happen.
Yes, but sometimes I think we all do that to some extent. But I think what I'm talking about is people who will actually sit for hours and hours and disengage from life and just eat, the entire night, because it's a way of drowning out their pain. And needless to say that leads to other problems, other health problems. And then we have escape, where people will escape into things like drug and alcohol. So I have to have this glass of wine, and that glass of wine at night turns into 2 glasses and 3 glasses and 4 glasses and then bottles, and it keeps increasing until now they're in a situation where, yes, they have escaped the feeling of the pain, but their situation hasn't changed, and they're now digging a deeper hole. So if we think about that image of the tempest and the storm that David talks about in this situation, the attempt to escape is creating an even bigger storm, because now you have health challenges, you have liver problems, you have alcoholism, and so the situation gets worse.
It's Hurricane Patricia.
Yes.
It's Hurricane Patricia that
Yes.
poor Mexico just went through. It just makes it bigger and bigger and bigger.
Bigger and bigger problem. And then we have people who try to escape into religion. And let me say here that I am not saying that religion is a bad thing. Religion can be a great coping mechanism if it is used properly. But it can become dysfunctional if it is a way of escape that causes you to go around your problem, ignore your problem, deny your problem, pretend your problem doesn't exist instead of dealing with it.
So what would be an example of that spiritual escape being in a dysfunctional form? What would that look like?
So a person, for example, who has very low self-esteem, comes from a very dysfunctional family background, for example, has father issues, abandonment by their fathers, never dealt with it, feel very, very insecure and weak, but now they take it in the spiritual realm. They're in a leadership position and they're seeking to have that self-esteem filled. And a good example of that is an example that was given by Bill Hybel at the Global Leadership Seminar, where he gave this example of a pastor who found himself in a situation where he would take over a church, be employed by a church, start on these very expensive building programs, drive up the expenses of the church to the point where it was unmanageable, get fired. And then after this had happened to the third church that he was in, Bill Hybel said one of the members of the board that fired him from this third church called him aside and said, "Why do you keep doing this? This is the third time you have done this. I look at your record and it keeps happening." And then Bill Hybel said what came out of that, or what was behind that, is that this person was told by his father that he would never amount to anything. And these expensive building programs that he was engaging in was an attempt to prove to himself that, look, I can be something. I can be successful. And so because he hasn't dealt with the issue of the past, the fatherhood issues, it's driving him to act in reckless ways, and he's taking whole congregations with him. So that's an example of how it can become dysfunctional in the spiritual sense.
And the other dysfunctional types of behaviors we've talked about in past shows that I think relate here are things like self-harm as a way of escape. We've talked about that in the past too, as a way some people, for emotional release, that they engage in. Would this apply here in this story as well?
Absolutely. Self-harm is a classical way of escape, because what people are doing by cutting or by burning or by picking their skin is a way of saying the intense emotional pain is so much that I need a distraction from it. And the distraction, when you cut and there is that blood and there is that pain that ensues, for that moment the pain, the emotional pain goes away, because it is taken over. It takes a backseat to the physical pain. So that's a way in which people escape that situation. But needless to say, it's an unhealthy way. If you have just joined us, you're listening to the Life Transformation Radio Show, and I'm your host, Michael Hart of Elam Counselling Services, and we're discussing overcoming intense emotional pain, looking at Psalm 55 as a background. That would mean studio is Melissa Waggett. And if you're not familiar with Elam Counselling Services, you can find out more about us on our website at elamcounselingministry.com. Elam is spelled E-L-I-M, counseling with 2 L's, elamcounselingministry.com. We can also be contacted by phone at 613-699-1677, 613-699-1677.
And so what are some other ways people try to escape these deep emotional pains?
Another way in which people try to escape is in relationships, sexual relationship, promiscuity, for example. A lot of people who have intense emotional pain, they will go from partner to partner, become involved in relationship, even if it's not promiscuity, but maybe a relationship can become a way of escape. And we have this saying about being on the rebound, for example, where someone who has just had their heart broken or had a spouse that died, find him or herself in a relationship with someone shortly after. And people looking around saying, wow, this is just too quick. And a lot of time it is, because until you have dealt with the pain from the past relationship, you are not in a position, you do not have the emotional reservoir that is necessary to engage in another relationship. Pornography can be a way of escape. For men that I treat for pornographic addiction, what we find is that the porn, when we begin to look at the feelings that they have leading up to indulgence in pornography, a lot of time they would say things like, I was stressed, I have these flashbacks of things that happened in the past. I just had a fight with my wife. And so there are situations where these things become a way of escape.
And so as we've gone through, there's clearly a lot of ways people try to run from these emotional wounds and these problems. Many of them are maladaptive or really not great for us. So to help people who may be in that pit, they're in the slimy pit and they want to get out, what strategies can they start doing today to start changing those feelings and hopefully getting rid of some of those maladaptive behaviors and get well?
Well, I think one of the first things that you can do is to avoid the defense mechanism that's called denial. Because when life is falling apart, when you're in this tempest and in this storm that David talks about, we at times do the opposite, where we go to this place where this is not really happening. We push it aside. We become very busy with church involvement. We volunteer for more committees, and we just get ourselves busy as a way of escaping from it. But one of the things you can do is to do what David did, just sit and begin to write about what's happening around you. And there's different components of that psalm. One of the components of that psalm is what happened. Later on in the psalm, he talks about the betrayal. So sit and write out what happened. Write about how you feel. Get in touch with your anger. Don't go to this place where you pretend that, you love the person that has just hurt you so much that you can't say anything that reflects anger. If you're angry, God already knows that you're angry. So even if you write these loving terms like, oh God, just bless this person, prosper them in their new relationship with their new lover, even though they have just dumped you, it's not coming from the heart, because deep down you might be saying,
you're not pulling the wool over God's eyes.
Yeah, you're not pulling the wool over God's eyes. So just be honest and just say, yes, God, I'm really angry right now. Right now, I'm not having any feelings of I'm not wishing him any well-being. As a matter of fact, my feelings to him is one of harm. Help me, God, to get over that. So when you do what David did and be very, very honest with how you feel, it's a release. It's a way of healing. Another thing that you can do when you're going through a situation of intense emotional pain, oftentimes when you get to in very severe situation, people can go into a state where they're not really in touch with the present. They're living in a lot of fear about the future. They're living in a situation, they're living an experience where it's as if, some people describe it as, it's as if I'm in this mental fog where I am not really here. So one of the exercises you can do is to just sit quietly. Be still and know that God is God. Sit quietly and observe your surroundings. Name the colors in the room that you're seeing. Look out through the window and describe the things that you're seeing, the colors that you're seeing. And then take it a step further. Close your eyes and try to recall what you're seeing. What colors did I see? One of the things that I do that is very powerful when I see clients in my office who are going through situations where they're disoriented or they're beginning to dissociate, I would take them through that exercise. I would say, close your eyes And first of all, look around the room and tell me the colors that you see. Now close your eyes and see if you can recall that color. And when they do that, it's as if they become in touch with reality again, and they realize, I'm not in that intense emotional situation right now. I am in a safe place. I am here. So sit quietly. Feel your feet against the floor. Take a deep breath. Be conscious of your breathing, of your chest rising and falling. Be conscious of your surrounding, because by doing that, you can calm yourself down and get more in control of how your body is reacting to that situation. And I think too, self-care, Melissa, is very, very important when you're going through intense emotional pain. Try to get try to get plenty of sleep. If you're in a situation where you have tried over and over and you just can't sleep, and sleep is very elusive, you might need to get help for a while from your doctor to get medication to help you to sleep, because sleep is a way that the body heals. And if you go through a long stretch of time where you're not sleeping night after night, then these other things like the edginess and the trembling of your body and the knot in your stomach and the irritability towards others just becomes worse.
It just becomes worse, and it taking that time for yourself becomes more and more elusive. Mm-hmm. And I think what you said there too, it's really important for you to be aware of the whole picture. And if you need to reach out for help from a medical professional, then you should do that. And that leads me to one of my other questions is, when do people need to get professional help? Because I know there's some strategies we can do in our living rooms or in that quiet place in our house, but I would imagine there are some situations where it's just too much for me to do at home alone.
Absolutely. So one of the situations in which it would be necessary to get help immediately is if you're having terrifying memories. Let us say your tempest and your storm is of a tragic incident that happened, and you're having terrifying memories, nightmares, or flashbacks. Flashbacks sometimes happen in cases of sexual abuse. If this is happening, you may need professional help. If you're having trouble functioning at home or at work, if you find yourself in a situation where simple tasks are now becoming very difficult for you to be, you will need professional help. If you're using alcohol or drugs to feel better and you feel it's getting out of control, and these way of escape is now affecting your functioning, then you will need professional help. If you feel emotionally disconnected from your body, or you're becoming disconnected from others, or you have this feeling of being numb all the time, you just can't feel anything, you might need professional help. Unfortunately, we're out of time today, but if you're listening to this show and you feel we're speaking to you, you're going through an intense emotional situation, I would encourage you to give us a call at 613-699-1677, or to contact us by the contact means on our website at elimcounselingministry.com. Until next time, this is your host, Michael Hart of Elim Counseling Services,
and Melissa Waggett,
praying that God would bless you in all your relationships and keep you sound in mind and pure in heart. Thank you for listening.